simply because I appreciated very sincerely and very deeply Father's sense of humor. It's strange, when I go back home now and meet many of the people, almost always they will ask me, how is Father Gino? In other words, they haven't forgotten him. And he left his mark in the place that certainly did appreciate him.
Today is the 40th anniversary when they broke into my church in Cowley, stole the Blessed Sacrament. I had found 9 of the hosts, but not the 10th. And I had no peace till we did find it. We went through the Johnson sawmill at Burmese, and from there we found out that they had 2 culprits in jail. And I guess we touched their heart, and they told us where they threw the Blessed Sacrament. And that very night we found it.
We're now standing at Bellevue, Alberta. And this is the spot where Father Gino Violini found the Blessed Sacrament on June the 3rd, 1948. Not exactly here, but further out, down towards the roadway. He had come from Blairmore, which is in that direction, and he had come on the old number 3 highway.
Cowley was a place that wasn't dear to anybody, but it did become very dear to me because I had pleaded with the bishop. I don't think Father Lemire even knows it yet, to be taken out of that dump.
I had to become a priest to get out of it myself.
This is a true story that happened in Alberta, Canada in the 1940s. Father Gino Violini had been appointed to a small mission church in Cowley, Alberta. He went there July 18th, 1946, and stood before the little church called St. Joseph's. As the priest was standing there, some parishioners came to see him and told him, "We don't need a priest, and if ever we do need a priest, we will inform Bishop Carroll about the fact. And Father, we don't want to see you reading your breviary, and you can get rid of your cassock." Poor Father Gino, what a horrible way his parishioners were treating him. What a sad situation it really was. Father Gino stayed in spite of what people had said to him, and he celebrated his first Mass there the following Sunday. Only 9 people showed up at church that Sunday, and the following Sunday it was even worse. Only 4 people came to Mass. If any of you remember reading the story of the cure of Ars, you will remember that he was faced with the same type of situation. The next 2 years were a disaster. Still, very few people showed up at church, and they hardly put any money in the collection plate. The poor priest was starving. He could only afford to get 1 loaf of bread per week. This he would cut into 7 pieces, and it would last him for the whole week. The only other thing he ate was dandelion leaves and water. Winter was very cold in Cowley, and the poor priest would find his blankets covered with snow when he awoke in the morning. This is because there were holes between the logs in the house where he lived. Father Gino's first Christmas collection was $1.13. The church was as cold as the house, and the water would freeze in the cruet, even though the priest had placed it on the little coal stove. Enough is enough, and finally one day Father Gino wrote a 16-page letter to Bishop Carroll. He was fed up, and he thought that the parish of Cowley was a total write-off, a hopeless case. But the bishop did not agree. He told Father Gino to stay put. The bishop had full confidence in Father Gino, and he expected him to bring about the full conversion of his parish. The poor priest now realized that he had to stay where he was, simply because it was God's holy will. God did not leave Father Gino's prayers and sufferings go unanswered, and one day the priest was going to be in for a wonderful surprise. On the feast of Corpus Christi, Father Gino headed towards the church for morning prayers. But as he was walking, he noticed that the door of the church was hanging off its hinges. He hurried in and gazed at the terrible scene. The walls were in shambles, the statues were destroyed, and the tabernacle had been split open, and the consecrated hosts were scattered down the main aisle of the church. One by one, Father Gino gathered up the hosts, counting each one. They were all there except the large benediction host. It was nowhere to be found. Poor Father Gino was worried. What had become of the other host? By now it was raining, and Father Gino notified Father Harrington from another parish about the missing consecrated host. Father Harrington organized a search party of some 2,000 people who searched the surrounding places and towns for the missing host. Meanwhile, the RCMP picked up 2 men at Cowley and questioned them in Blairmore. These 2 men had stolen a pickup truck and abandoned it down the highway when the police had discovered them. When Father Gino was able to see these men, he recognized them. They had come from Lethbridge and had been seated next to him at a baseball game a couple of days before. Then he listened to Sergeant Parsons, who was questioning the men. "Remember, it may not mean much to you or me, but you fellows stole his Jesus." Father Gino then explained the meaning of the Blessed Sacrament to them. He explained that when the priest says the words of the consecration, the host becomes God, even though it only looks like a piece of bread, and that this is very precious to Catholics. He then added, "I will drop all the charges if you 2 men will only tell me where you threw the host." The 2 robbers were then touched to the heart and began to show that they were sorry. They then offered to help find the consecrated host. One of them admitted, "I threw the host out of the truck window just before the police arrested us because I knew that it would be evidence and it would prove that we were guilty of robbing the church." The rain stopped. By now the 2 robbers had been handcuffed and they all piled into the police cruiser. They were off to look for the stolen host. It was about 6 p.m. when they neared the spot where the stolen host had been thrown. But what a surprise met their eyes when they arrived. As they rounded the corner east of Bellevue, they all saw the host floating in mid-air, beside the highway. Beautiful rays of colored light were coming from it. Even before the car had stopped, Father Gino leapt from the car and ran towards the astonishing sight. Sergeant Parsons was right behind him. Father Gino was overcome with joy and wonder. He fell on his knees in adoration. Sergeant Parsons did the same, and knelt right in a puddle of mud. Then Father Gino stood up and reached for the host. The rain had not damaged it. It looked as fresh and white as the day he had consecrated it. As the priest touched the host, all the people that were there heard these words, "Father Gino, please take me back to Cowley." Yes, Jesus actually spoke from the consecrated host. What a wonderful and glorious mystery. Here was Jesus asking to be taken back to the desecrated church, to a parish that Father Gino had wanted to leave. As they returned to Cowley, although Sergeant Parsons was driving, very often he would look at the host that Father Gino was holding in his hands. Bishop Carroll arrived the next day and told Father Gino that he himself would be the one to rededicate the church since it had been desecrated. He stayed to pray with the priest, and when he had finished praying, he turned to Father Gino saying, "Great changes will soon take place in this parish." And the bishop was right. A few days later, Sergeant Parsons came and asked to be instructed in the Catholic faith. And his wife and children soon joined him and became Catholics too. Also, 2 other RCMP from the area asked to become Catholics as well. As time went on, more and more Catholics began to return to the church. The parish mission became so popular that the beer hall shut down when the mission was in progress. The people who were in the beer hall, many of whom were not Catholic, would carry the bar stools to the church to listen to Father Gino's sermons, and even the pot-bellied stove had to be taken out to make room for everyone who came to hear the sermons at the mission. So you see, it is important to persevere in prayer and good works, though we cannot see why at the time. If we offer these things up to God without complaining, we will be able to save many souls, and one day, when we are in heaven, we'll be able to see the souls that we helped save. Some may be even our family, our friends, or even our enemies.